Many countries claim strong military power, but not all have effective defense forces. There are some countries that cannot afford a powerful army or simply choose not to have a strong military presence in their own territory. And the results are sure to raise some eyebrows. So, which countries have the weakest armies in the world? That's what we're going to answer. But before we start, if you're new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. Number 10, North Macedonia. North Macedonia, officially called the Republic of North Macedonia, is a small landlocked country located in the Balkan Peninsula. It has a population of just over 2 million, and the entire area of the country could reportedly fit inside the United States more than 380 times. The $108 million that North Macedonia spends on its military is equivalent to only 0.85% of its annual gross domestic product. This is much lower than the European average of 1.3% and the United States rate of 3.4%, especially given the history of tension and conflict with Albania. Despite this, the limited budget is still enough to maintain a somewhat decent army and air force. Because it has no access to the sea, it also has no naval capabilities. But they have 14 transport and 4 attack helicopters. Operated by around 13,000 military personnel, of which 5,000 are reservists, it's clear that North Macedonia is not yet ready to face the world at any time. In war, troop numbers still matter. But even though their military expenses are simple, they make sure it's worth it because every year, Santa is brought to Skopje International Airport using a military helicopter. If Santa greeted people by firing a rocket launcher, everyone would probably panic. Macedonia's military strength could jump by 1,000 from fear alone. Number 9, his boss in Herzegovina. They say diamonds form under intense pressure, but that's not the case for the armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This southeastern European country formed its army during the Bosnian War in 1992. Due to the sudden need and lack of equipment, they were forced to recruit anyone who could fight, including members of criminal gangs. Although their military was reorganized in the early 2000s, the situation barely improved. Although Bosnia and Herzegovina has a small coastline of about 12 miles, they don't have any naval forces or maritime equipment. Their air force is believed to have 19 helicopters, but according to reports, none of these are actually designed for defense. The country's limited strength can be found in its land army, which consists of about 10,500 active military personnel. Their armed forces are structured for 6,000 reservists, but these reserves reportedly barely exist in reality. Despite limited personnel and equipment, it's surprising they maintain a defense budget of nearly $165 million, which is large compared to their military's actual strength. This amount has become the center of discussion in recent years, especially when the public started to question where the people's money is really going. In 2012, the chairman of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina himself, Miloš, called for the abolition of the military in response to the allegedly suspiciously high expenses, but very poor results. Ultimately, the country's armed forces remained. But if your own government is starting to question whether your military still has any purpose, that's clearly not a sign of a global military powerhouse. Number 8, Suriname, Over the past 40 years, Suriname has faced 2 coups and a civil war, significantly weakening its military. As a Dutch-speaking country in South America, they have a severe lack of warships, aircraft, and even military vehicles. And if they do have any, most are old, broken, and outdated. The armed forces of Suriname are composed of only about 1,850 active personnel from a population of less than 600,000 people. On a small scale, this could have been effective if not for the severe lack of equipment. Currently, the Suriname Air Force only operates 3 helicopters that are actually in use. For a long time, the Navy and Coast Guard have had 3 patrol boats that were purchased back in the 1970s. By the early part of 2010, these were so old that not a single one was operational. Until they were able to purchase 3 new patrol boats in 2002. Since then, Suriname has been forced to rely on military donations from other countries. The coups and internal conflicts also badly damaged their economy. Because of all the problems surrounding their armed forces, it's no longer surprising that Suriname's defense budget only reaches about $63 million. And in fact, that's not even enough to buy a single F-35 fighter jet. Number 7. Somalia. Since its government was overthrown in 1991, Somalia has remained plagued by civil war. As expected, this has made it very hard to organize and strengthen their military. Although Somalia officially has 20,000 active military personnel, this is very small compared to the country's population of over 15 million. Due to internal conflict, much of the population is part of armed groups outside the national military. This also means that the Army's limited equipment, around 100 armored vehicles and 10 tanks, is often preoccupied with solving internal problems instead of guarding and defending the country's borders. If another country invades, it would be a major disadvantage for Somalia. Even though Somalia has the longest coastline in mainland Africa, it practically had no navy until 2012, because the civil war destroyed most of the national institutions. That year, the United Arab Emirates helped fund the revival of the Somalian naval force. However, even with help from other countries, Somalia's defense budget remained very small, reaching only $62.2 million. And to give you an idea of the gap, the United States budget is about 12,000 times bigger, reaching $750 billion. Number 6. Bhutan. Bhutan, officially called the Kingdom of Bhutan, is a small country in Southeast Asia that is better known for its monks and monasteries than for its military strength, although in ancient times both were considered impressive by others. As a completely landlocked country with an area of about 15,000 square miles, just slightly larger than the state of Maryland in the United States, it only has 7,000 military personnel. Because it lacks a coastline, it has no navy, and the need for tanks was recognized. Even so, they have 2 helicopters and 27 armored vehicles used for maintaining order. Their value was proven during Bhutan's first war in 2010. The country was fighting a small group of Indian separatists nearby. The army, which was composed of only about 6,000 soldiers, almost couldn't handle the battle, but they still managed to drive the enemy away. And as a country with few natural resources and surrounded by mountain ranges, Bhutan naturally has an advantage because, to be honest, it's not that attractive to invaders. Number 5. Costa Rica. Surprisingly, the Republic of Costa Rica has lasted over 70 years without a real military. After a severe civil war in 1948, the military was disbanded to ensure that the government would never again use its weapons against its own people. Instead of an army, Costa Rica created the public force, which includes the Civil Guard and Air Surveillance Service. It is composed of around 12,000 officers responsible for law enforcement, crime prevention, and guarding the borders. However, they are also not that well equipped when it comes to security and defense. As of 2018, they only had 70 basic and short-range vessels to patrol the country's more than 800 miles of coastline. Fortunately, that year, the United States donated 3 patrol boats, 2 interceptors, and 4 helicopters. However, there was one problem. None of these were armed. Even relying solely on events or foreign aid, there are clear benefits to not having a military, because they don't need to spend on expensive weapons, training, and soldiers. Costa Rica is able to allocate more than 7% of its gross domestic product to education. The strong focus on education instead of militarization aims to create knowledgeable and responsible citizens to maintain the country's stability and prevent another outbreak of civil war. In terms of the military, Costa Rica may be weak, but that doesn't mean they aren't smart. Number 4, Panama. How is that? Panama followed Costa Rica's example. Famous for the Panama Canal, the country abolished its military in 1990. After being led by a military dictatorship for many decades, the new government succeeded in completely abolishing the army and replacing it with the Panamanian Public Forces. These forces are composed of the National Police, as well as units for aviation, naval, and border security. Although some of these units have combat capabilities, their use is strictly controlled and limited. For a population of approximately 3.8 million, it is estimated that only about 10,000 active personnel make up their forces. And even though Panama is located at one of the most important waterways in the world, their naval group only has 33 naval vessels, of which 16 are patrol boats. Their air group also lacks equipment, as it relies only on 23 helicopters. And how many of these are assigned for ambulance service? And again, although it's not surprising anymore, Panama has 0 fighter jets. And yes, even North Korea has access to fighter jets, but honestly, these two countries are very different from each other. North Korea is extremely militaristic, spending about a quarter of its gross domestic product on defense. They do have intense firepower, but if you compare that to their beaches with the beaches in Panama, I know where I'd rather live. And it definitely doesn't require a fighter jet or that person. Number 3, Mauritius. Goodbye. Mauritius, an island in the Indian Ocean, is famous for its beaches and coral reefs, not its military strength. Despite being one of the strongest economies in the sub-Saharan Africa region, this country, with a population of about 1.2 million, has no neighboring countries that could pose a threat of invasion. And since it has had no need to expand its territory since gaining independence from Great Britain in 1968, it has seen no reason to establish a regular or even a reserve military. However, it does have the Mauritius Police Force, which is composed of about 12,500 officers. They are responsible for everything from Coast Guard patrols to riot control. But since the island is more likely to be invaded by tourists than by neighboring countries, Mauritius's defense budget is only $22 million. That's only 0.15% of the country's gross domestic product, much less than most of the world. That's why their police force, a small military-style unit of about 1,400 soldiers, remains quite small. It was reported that they only allocate funds for 6 police transport helicopters and 3 maritime patrol aircraft. The Coast Guard of Mauritius, which is their closest version of a navy, is made up of only 15 patrol and strike boats, some of which were even donated by the United States. Because of this, it's clear that we don't need to worry about Mauritius taking over the world anytime soon, although it was reported that they have 4 rocket launchers and 2 mortars. So don't even think about any kind of one-man assault there. But do you know what is completely safe for someone? That's hitting the like and subscribe button, and you can even consider that your personal victory for today. Number 2, Iceland. Despite being a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Iceland has had no active or reserve military since the late 1800s. This developed yet peaceful country provides financial support and civilian personnel to NATO, but you won't see a military march on Icelandic soil. In exchange for their contribution, NATO member countries provide military personnel to Iceland on a rotational basis. So the soldiers you see on Icelandic territory are more like temporary visitors with guns than a permanent army. As a result, Iceland spends just 0.07% of its $25.88 billion gross domestic product on defense, saving on its defense budget. This small budget mainly goes to the Coast Guard, a small unit made up of around 120 people. Despite being small, their role is still important in protecting the territory and interests of Iceland in the ocean, especially since a large part of the country's economy depends on fishing. The Cod Wars nearly became conflicts as peaceful Icelanders clashed with Britain over fishing territories in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And when we say Cod War, it doesn't mean a fight to the death between fish. In the end, Iceland only won against Britain through diplomatic means, Because if there had been an actual battle, Iceland's small seafaring force would surely have been overwhelmed or defeated immediately. Luxembourg. Luxembourg, a small landlocked nation, lies between France, Germany, and Belgium. The country is known as a tax haven, but it's not just taxes they avoid. They also steer clear of all kinds of conflict and war. With a population of 600,000 and over 40% foreigners, the small country has a minimal armed force. As a landlocked country, they lack a navy but have a small air force with 2 multi-purpose helicopters. Luxembourg's main weakness is its small size, evident in its all-volunteer army of just 939 people. If you look closer, you'll see this number isn't made up entirely of soldiers. This includes 137 civil staff, 81 officers, and 54 musicians. In fact, the Luxembourg army has more musicians for their ceremonial band, which is why one of the corporals directs the 428 volunteer soldiers. If France or Germany ever tries to invade Luxembourg, one song might be enough to send them packing. Whew. Bonus, Monaco. Woo. Monaco has a large budget for its monarchy, casinos, and Formula One, but spends very little on defense. Although 32% of the population are millionaires, the second smallest country in the world has no regular military force. Monaco relies on France for major defense matters. However, Monaco isn't entirely defenseless without their larger French neighbor. It has 2 small military units. The first is the CDCDP. It protects the principals in the judiciary. And second, the CDSP, which is responsible for civil defense and firefighting. Only 124 soldiers remain nationwide, mostly for ceremonial roles. Due to the lack of firepower, Monaco's biggest problem seems to be the unusual appearance of their uniforms. Although things can always get worse, sometimes the best military country just seems like it doesn't exist at all. Faced with various defense strategies such as a strong army, no military, or prioritizing education or diplomacy, how crucial is it for a country to maintain a large military? Comment your opinion below and we'll see each other again in our next video.